Hello, my name is 환산스님, and this is Sun Meditation in English. So please assume meditation posture. And for the first half of this program, I will assume the modern meditation posture of sitting in a chair. And from here, remember to hit all of the checkpoints. So make sure your spine is straight. Right hand against your abdomen, left hand on top. Two thumb tips together to form an elegant rainbow arc. Tuck in your chin slightly to raise the crown of your head, the top of your head higher to the ceiling, and thereby fully extending our spines. Take your tongue and place it lightly against the roof of our mouths and look straight ahead toward the floor, roughly 3 meters or 10 feet in front of you. Now, relax and release all tension from our bodies except for the minimal amount that we need to support ourselves in this position. And from here, we now enter into preparation breathing. Okay, so why don't we do preparation breathing together? So inhale fully through the nose. Hold. And then breathe out through the mouth. Let this breathing cleanse you and refresh you. Let it help you to push out all the worries and stress and tension in our minds and bodies. And now we enter into abdominal breathing. So we're going to be doing all of our breathing through the nose. And when we inhale very slowly, very naturally, very gently. And as we inhale, we push out our lower belly as if our lower belly is filling up with the air. Now, of course, this isn't actually happening on a biological level, but we will do it, we will conduct the practice as if that's what's happening, with that feeling. So we inhale for 2 to 3 seconds, fill our lower bellies, pause for 2 to 3 seconds, and then we exhale through our nose, and as we exhale, we draw in our lower bellies as if we're pulling our belly button toward our spine and squeezing the air out of there. And then for the out breath, that should be slightly longer for 3 to 4 seconds. Now, this is just a point of reference. There will be those of us who have a natural breathing cycle that's slightly slower. And there may be some of us who have a naturally long breathing cycle. But what we should find is that however short or long our breathing cycle is, as we conduct this breathing, the tension leaves our body, our mind becomes clear. And as our bodies and minds clarify and become relaxed like that, our breathing cycle will naturally become softer and a little bit longer and a little bit more regular. And we'll see a very positive cycle of influence where as our breathing cycle becomes longer and more stable and more regular, our bodies become more relaxed and centered and balanced, and our mind also becomes very calm and clear. Okay, so why don't we engage abdominal breathing? So we inhale, hold, and then exhale. Once again, inhale. And now we engage our hwadu, the question that is the object of our meditation. And why don't we practice this aloud for a few breaths? So we inhale, hold, and then together, imoko. Imoko. What is this? What is that pulls my body along? What is it within me that makes the decision to move and controls my actions and my movements? When I think of something, what is it within me that has generated that thought? When I see an image in my mind, perhaps of the room that I live in, or of a close friend, or of something that I own, like my car or my desk, what is it within me that sees that image thrown upon the screen of my mind? That's what we're asking. And when we say imoko, we are trying to generate the state of inner doubt, the urgent state of trying to know the unknowable, to perceive the unperceivable, to attain the unattainable. So once again, inhale, hold, and then together, 이목고. And once again, I will ask the members of our studio audience and the members of our viewers at home to continue to practice, to engage this posture, this breathing, and this meditation throughout the course of this program. And I would actually like to emphasize that today. Of course, I always say that on these programs, but today's topic is a bit troubling, I think, for many of us. So as we feel our emotional responses in the course of this program, try to use our posture, our breathing, and our meditation to let those responses flow through us and stay quietly centered within our breathing and our hwadu, imoko. So today's topic for contemplation and meditation is something that I've been hearing more and more about, both among my native Korean friends and the people I know from abroad, international friends. And that is this feeling that seems to be becoming more pervasive in our society and in societies across the world, especially modern ones, this feeling of I don't like myself. I don't like who I am. Now, I think that all of us have at one point or another done something that we regret. And many of us have moments in our past that we don't really want to revisit, that are painful to us. And in the course of growing to adulthood and moving forward with our lives, we may discover, in fact, maybe all of us discover things about ourselves that disappoint us or that we're ashamed of. Now, all of these things are very natural, but there comes a time when that disappointment in oneself, that disapproval about what one has done or about what one has experienced or had to undergo, this grows into a kind of active dislike. And it can become very, very painful. It can turn into a kind of searing self-loathing or despising of oneself. And then it's turned into a problem. And when we become like that, we may find it very difficult to look at ourselves in the mirror. We may find ourselves very tense around other people, as if we have some stain on our soul or on our consciousness that someone might notice, someone might detect this terrible thing that we're hiding within ourselves. And I think many of us have the experience of this very hostile so-called inner critic, a voice in our heads that's constantly criticizing everything we do in real time, exactly as I live, everything I say, everything I do. There may be a voice in our head that says, "Why did you say that? That was so stupid. Why did you do that? Oh, look at you, you did this again," or you should have done that. And so it's almost like we have a built-in torturer in our brains who are criticizing us at every moment, like this critic that's following us around in our own heads that we cannot hide from. And if this situation is left to persist, then what we may find is like a plurality of voices in our heads, many voices, a chorus in our head. And it may become so painful to undergo this withering self-criticism that we may find ourselves answering the voices in our head. And so we have this very loud argument or conversation going on in our heads. And the only thing that all those voices have in common is that they disapprove of who I am, who we have become. And if someone were to take some kind of special microphone and stick it into our heads, or wire something to our brains so that our brainwaves, our thoughts could be played through a speaker, and we heard what was going on in our heads, almost anyone would think that that is really crazy, that that person has become crazy. And it's no laughing matter because that is what can happen. This level of self-criticism, self-hatred, self-loathing can drive us literally crazy. So that is the topic that I would like to bring up today. And it's not one that's often dealt with in Buddhism. In one tradition of Buddhism I know, they say that it's never been dealt with because traditional cultures didn't have this kind of problem. So maybe it is a modern problem, but one way or the other, I think what's certain is that people, very many people experience this, and people that you wouldn't expect experience this. People who seem, very capable and confident and successful looking are inwardly deeply suffering from this feeling of personal inadequacy or a personal disapproval of oneself. So I would like to sort of cover this topic and then see what Sun Buddhist teachings and practices can say to us for getting out of a situation like that. Now, broadly speaking, I think that there are different ways in which this type of self-disapproval or self-dislike can occur. And I think one that I have found common among the people that I knew growing up and many people that I've met both in the United States and Korea is that situations where we as children maybe receive too much attention and too much expectation from the authority figures in our lives, maybe our parents, maybe our teachers, maybe mentor figures or older brother or sister figures, or even our peers. But there's something embedded in our minds, and that we're expected to do great things, that we're expected to be special. Now, this is a very illogical thing because not everyone can be special. The definition of special is to be not like the others. And so this expectation that everyone be special is a contradiction in terms, and we all know that, but still, it's the way we've been raised. And so we think we must be special. And you get into this mindset, especially for people who have been raised to achieve, to accomplish, to be competitive. You can fall into this very painful mindset where if you don't succeed, if you don't win, if you don't take the gold medal, then automatically that's a failure. That it's not simply success that we want, but that anything else but pure unadulterated success is a failure. And when we're young, we may dream great dreams. In college, I had friends who dreamed of becoming great in their fields. The next Einstein, the next Van Gogh, the next Steve Jobs. And as their lives played out, not everyone can do that, and they had to go through great self-disappointment and even self-dislike as a result of this. Now, it may be that we have reason to believe that we're special. Maybe we have some outsized talent or some outsized achievement. Maybe we're unusually attractive or charismatic. Maybe we've done amazing things in our youth and expect to continue to. But nonetheless, there comes a point when the expectation becomes unrealistic and we begin to what should inspire and drive us forward instead begins to cripple us and to pull our energy away and eventually can make us cave in and can eventually paralyze us. So what can be done about that in the Buddhist context? Now, within Buddhism, Buddhism is famous for taking as its main purpose the dissolution of the so-called false self, that any image that we have of ourselves is considered inaccurate. It's a very censored image, it's a very arbitrary image built up of the memories that we can still remember, thoughts that have been embedded in our heads, either from society or from family, and then just our own imaginations. It's very arbitrary, it's very haphazard. In fact, it's also always shifting. It's not even stable, and yet we cling to it. And that is the very definition of unenlightenment in traditional Buddhism. So having any of that kind of self-image at all is considered to be a source of suffering. Now, within the Buddhist context, one of the problems of having a self-image like that, especially one in which you're driving yourself to be better than others on some level, even though you may try to be outwardly humble, the problem with that is that it puts you inherently into a competitive and conflictual relationship with the rest of the world. And you are now in an endless competitive race, in an endless process of comparing yourself to others and being compared to others. So the mindset is inherently stressful, inherently self-centered, and inherently self-serving. From the Buddhist perspective, and this is something that my own teacher, Sun Master Songdam, likes to emphasize, if that inner intention is self-aggrandizement, then no matter what you do, it's not really very helpful. No matter how many accolades you win, it is not truly praiseworthy. And so meditation takes as its goal the dismantling of our false self-image and enlightenment to our true selves. And when we see this, when we can give ourselves to this path, we can change our mindset. We are called upon to change our mindset within the Buddhist context, not to one of winning and succeeding and holding ourselves above others, but to serving. The purpose of enlightenment in Mahayana Buddhism is not simply to save ourselves from our own suffering, but to guide all other living beings to suffering. Now, if we take this ancient spiritual tradition, this ancient religious standard, and apply it to our modern lives, what we can say is that we, instead of trying to win and gain and attain all the time, we might try to help and serve and save other people to the best extent that we can. And when that happens, we are no longer judging ourselves in a quantitative way, measuring ourselves completely. And if any of you actually go out and try this, and there's all different ways to, different kinds of welfare practices and social service practices that we can engage in. If you actually do this, you will gain a self-respect and a self-esteem and a certainty and conviction in the worthiness of your effort that is far different, far more powerful, far more authentic than the kind of drunken exultation that we feel when we win the game, get into the school of our choice, get the promotion, which tends to be very short-lived. It's a fleeting thrill compared to this very deeply rooted self-respect that we can gain when we devote ourselves to the betterment of the lives of all people rather than to our own. So this is a solution that we can do. We can shift our mindset, and we can remind ourselves that maybe once our parents told us we can be president, we can win the gold medal, we can become, a Hollywood star or something like that. But that image was implanted in us to give us the confidence to move forward. It has outserved its purpose. And one of the signs of its outserving its purpose is that it begins to torture you. It's like a shoe that doesn't fit anymore, clothing that doesn't fit anymore. It will constrain you and cut off your circulation, and it needs to be let go of. And a healthier, more inclusive, more mature view of the world needs to be cultivated and opened up. There are 7 billion people in the world today. It is impossible to be the best of 7 billion people. There are tens, maybe hundreds of billions of people who have lived before us in history and almost certainly will following us in history. How far will you go? How far are we to go in comparing ourselves with them? We compare ourselves with others in the most arbitrary way, whether we're the fastest kid on the block or the smartest kid in the school or the smartest one in our office, or who are we comparing ourselves? What is the objective standard of comparison? Even these standards have no basis in reality in a world that's filled with so many people who are each totally different from one another, each with their own special gift to give to the world. We are literally incomparable with one another. And this is a truth that we need to come to terms with through our meditative practice within the context of our own life experience. So that's a recommendation that I would like to give for those of us who impress upon themselves unrealistic or overly harsh standards of acceptability, competence, attainment, and success. Now, there's also another, I found in my interactions with people, another way in which we can arrive at this state of self-dislike or self-disapproval, and that it's much sadder, and that can happen because we've been traumatized, that we have grown up or lived our lives in an environment that may have been abusive or negligent, and so we are taught that our suffering doesn't mean anything. It's unimportant, that we are unimportant, that we as we are, there's something wrong with us, that we are somehow lowly, shameful, we ought to be ashamed, that we ought to accept what would be intolerable conditions for other people. And we may begin to see abusive behavior or negligent behavior, unloving behavior, or cruel behavior as something normal, something that we should just be adjusted to. And so our whole perception of the world can be distorted. And this is quite tragic, and I have seen it in both the United States and within my time in Korea. Many years ago, I've alluded to this on this program before, but many years ago I taught meditation and counseling to individuals who had both drug addiction and diagnosable mental illness. And among them, I remember two individuals in particular. One was a young man. And this young man was, a very appealing person on the surface. You would never think that there was anything wrong with him. He had done some amateur bodybuilding, so he was in really good shape, very good looking, very, very well-mannered and very, very decent. Everyone took an instant liking to him. And yet he had mental illness and he had a drug addiction problem. And then I found out later that when he was growing up, and even at that age that he was at that time, which was 26, 27, his father made him live in a tent in their apartment. He had a tent in a room. And anytime he did something bad or anytime the father got upset with him or was going to take, he was ordered to go into that tent. So in a sense, he was raised in a kind of a doghouse in his apartment. And where he lived, he began to understand that he was a source of shame, that he was shameful, and that this kind of humiliation was just a normal thing in his childhood. So even when I had gotten to know him when he was a young man, a capable young man, he was still living like that with his family, and he was so convinced that there was nothing of worth about him. So in that situation, he had lost any sense of self-respect or self-appeal. Another individual was actually a very talented songwriter, and his dream was to write songs, but for some reason, and I don't know the specifics of his background, he had no ability to defend himself. And he inevitably made friends with people who abused them. He would invite them over to his apartment and they would destroy his apartment. And he would never do anything to stop them. He would never do anything to disengage from them. He felt he was not worth it. He felt that this was the behavior that he deserved. In fact, he went out and sought it out. Now, in Korea, even in the monasteries, I have met people who I believe have had such difficult lives prior to coming to the monastery that they have no real understanding of how to give and receive and share love. And so they were among the loneliest people that I had ever met. But they were impossible to approach because the only kind of relationships they knew were hostile, attacking ones. And so if they met someone that they wanted to get close to, they didn't know any other way to do it but by attacking and but by being very critical. And so these people very tragically created an immense amount of alienation and loneliness within their own lives, as well as causing a great deal of strife around them. So there can be this process where we've grown up in an environment or gone through circumstances that teach us that we're unworthy and that and that also prevent us from creating positive relationships and positive behaviors that would actually help us to enhance our self-image. So in the case of Sun Buddhism, I will, in cases like this, the suffering is very deep, and the wounds that have been suffered are very, very strong ones that are not easily erased. So I'm not going to sit here and say meditation can cure everything. I do believe that meditation will help. And I think that meditation will help in the sense that it will give people who are suffering these cycles, these self-defeating destructive cycles of behavior and emotion and self-regard, it will give them a chance to find some centeredness and stability within this whirlpool of painful emotions that they often find themselves living in. So meditation is definitely something that anybody will want to do if you feel that you're that kind of person. And another thing is, with your meditation, to try to reflect on things after they have happened. When things are happening, these are such deeply rooted emotions, it's very, very hard to control ourselves. So we have to give ourselves a little bit of a break, even when everyone else seems to be upset with us. And to look back and think and just reflect as clearly as we can, what did I do in that situation that precipitated these negative events? How did I react? How did that person react? And think very clearly, how is that person perceiving me? And is that an accurate perception? This is not an easy thing to do because it forces us to face our shortcomings. It forces us to face our mistakes, which is not easy when you are already suffering from a lack of self-respect. Now, what I would like to say in this regard if there are viewers or members here who are suffering, who feel that they are suffering from that, I would like to pass on something that Sun Master Songdam once taught me long ago, and that is this. Everything and everyone in this universe is here for a reason, including us, including you. We need to develop compassion and love for ourselves, even when it was not given to us as we were growing up. This is often said, but it's not easy to do, learning how to love ourselves, to embrace our own shortcomings, to understand that when we behave badly, when we make mistakes, it's not because we are bad in and of ourselves. It's because all bad behavior comes from a place of suffering. It is an unhealthy or a dysfunctional response to suffering that deserves compassion and understanding, not punishment, not disapproval. This is a compassion that we need to direct toward ourselves and understand the most fundamental Buddhist teaching, which is that we are all Buddha. We are all possessed of an inner light that has infinite value. And what you need to know, if you are suffering through this, if you are dealing with memories of trauma, if you find yourself locked in self-defeating behaviors that have driven everyone away from you, what you need to know is that when you fight for yourself, when you try to cure your own problems, you are not doing it alone and you are not doing it just for yourself. You are fighting for all of us. You are fighting for everyone who suffers as you do. And when you come to a solution, that solution will help very many people. So this fight is a noble one that deserves your respect, your esteem, your care and understanding, and most of all, your compassion and forgiveness. Even if you have genuinely hurt other people, even if you have genuinely caused damage, that does not mean you are a monster or a demon or a freak or a loser. It simply means that you are saddled with difficult problems, with difficult habits that we call in Buddhism karma. And the image of a human being in Buddhism is this. A human being is a Buddha who is shackled by the chains of their negative karma. That is what we are, and that is what you are. And this is the first step that needs to be taken. Now, in addition to that, what I would like to say is if you have engaged in behavior, or if you have accepted abusive behavior from others to such an extent that your life is unmanageable, then I would like to suggest on a very common sense level that we seek professional help. Go to a psychologist, a trained psychologist or therapist or psychiatrist. Someone who is one step removed from our lives. A stranger that we can tell our problems to and it won't have repercussions back in our personal lives. Someone to whom we can step out of our lives and go to for a few minutes. Now, or a few hours. Now, the tradition of psychotherapy is well accepted and embraced and understood within modern Western societies. And maybe even that's an overstatement. Maybe some people or very many people are still very suspicious of that type of treatment. But in traditional Asian cultures, and perhaps in other cultures as well, people are very, very uncomfortable with psychotherapy. And on a personal note, we may feel just, I can't do that. I just can't go and tell somebody this stuff. If that's the case, if we have some kind of cultural or personal aversion to this type of self-healing or this type of self-treatment, then another thing that I would like to suggest is the very traditional one of going to find a very qualified spiritual teacher and joining the community under that teacher. So we find ourselves within a supportive network of social relationships within the context of a community that is training itself to become more wise, more compassionate, more loving and forgiving, and who will have the resilience to accept me as I deal with these problems that have been thrust upon me. So something like that, finding a spiritual teacher has to be done very carefully. For Koreans living in Korea, I can recommend my own temple, Yonghwa-sa in Incheon, because my Dharma brothers, my fellow Sunims are very responsible, upstanding spiritual practitioners whom I have a great deal of respect and affection for. Even if that's the case, if that's not available to you, or if you're not Buddhist, I won't even say that you have to stay within Buddhism. Any spiritual teacher, really who's qualified, really who has the requisite wisdom and integrity in any religious tradition, I think, would only be helpful. But I would say that if you're being overwhelmed by these kind of problems, then definitely seek the help of others. You are absolutely worth it, and you have something to give to the world, and there is a better life to be lived. So that's what I have to say on this part, and maybe we can take a break, and when we get back, we can continue on our discussion of occasions when we feel like we don't like ourselves. And we're back, and we are discussing dealing with problems of self-dislike, in extreme cases, self-loathing and self-hatred. And I've heard this often from young people, very reflective young people. And we may find ourselves in a position, especially as we grow up into adulthood and go out into the world and learn about the world and learn the history of the world, we may see a world of suffering. We may look upon the history of human civilization, and we may see a history of bloodshed, of cruelty and violence, war, the oppression of entire populations, acts of genocide, rape, theft. We can see terrible things that people have done. We can look out into the world as it exists today. We can turn on the news at any given moment and see the most terrible things, people doing the most horrible things to one another. And so our dislike of ourselves, our dislike of humanity's behavior can emerge from this very authentic inquiry into the nature of human existence, into the nature of the human mind and heart. We may look within ourselves and find recesses of ugliness, things we're deeply ashamed of, capacity for violence, deception, abuse of others, misuse of others. So in this kind of naked confrontation with the true face of humanity, we may find ourselves beginning to fall into self-loathing, and we may find ourselves hating ourselves and hating human beings in general and hating the world for not being able to solve its own problems, for not being able to restrain itself from its own bad behavior that causes so much destruction and suffering, not only for our own species, but for the entire natural world. When we take a reckoning of human nature like this, and of human behavior, and the history of human behavior, and if we're very serious about this, about weighing our own morality and our own decency, we may find, in a very intelligent and rational way, that if there is a devil in this world, if there is a demonic presence in the world, it may well be us human beings. And for those religious traditions that have the image of a devil or a demon or some kind of enemy of the human race, surely that image was created. That image is a reflection of us. And so what are we to do when we take such a harsh and in many ways honest and probing reckoning of ourselves and find only reason to despair, and we may start to think, well, then why should I live? Why should I live in a world where people behave like this, where I have to be subjected to so many insults and humiliations and put up with so much unfairness, and where I myself am imperfect and flawed and capable of hurting others? What makes life worth living? What makes this world habitable? Why does the human race deserve to be saved? And when you have a mindset like that, and you're told that what you have to do in life is make a lot of money and attain to a high position, get married and have children, the answer simply doesn't fit the question that's in our minds. And we should review why that doesn't fit. Because when you're thinking like this, you may start to think, well, I'm crazy because the world seems to be getting on fine and I'm the only one who has a problem with anything. But I would like to encourage those of us who are that inquisitive and who are so willing to see themselves in the mirror, that I believe their conclusion, if their conclusion is despair, I believe that the conclusion is misguided, but the effort itself is something to be praised, is something to be respected. When we're told to make money and develop a reputation and develop power, these are tools to be used. These are not endpoints. Money is used to be spent. Power is used to achieve things. Fame, reputation, and prestige are used to enhance communication so we can quickly get to know each other and know what to do about one another and how to relate to one another. They are means to an end. If you don't know what your end point is, if you don't know what the goal of your life is, and you are taught simply to accumulate the instruments of living, that just doesn't make sense. And we ought to be wise enough and smart enough and honest enough to see that. It's like being told you should stockpile as many hammers and nails as you can when you have no idea what you're going to build, when you have no idea whether you're going to build anything. Why have so many hammers and nails? Why spend your life in pursuit of hammers and nails? Why spend your life devoted to the small thrill of attaining what you wanted to get that leaves us almost instantly, very quickly, that thrill, that satisfaction leaves us. Why spend our lives chasing these short-term pleasures? This is a question that I really believe that we need to ask ourselves when we find ourselves faced with these deeply probing questions about the nature and worth of human existence. Telling someone to make money, become famous, become successful, and have children is basically ducking the question. And this idea of getting married and having children is problematic to someone who deeply questions the decency and worth of the human race. Why produce more human beings? Why live with another human being who's just as bad as I am? So this is a very serious problem. And I believe that all of us face it on one level or another, and perhaps only few of us will deal with it consciously as a topic of their life struggle or as the goal of their life struggle. And what I would like to say to any of us and any of you who might be dealing with this kind of question, who might be finding nothing of worth within human beings, within human civilization, and worst of all, within our own hearts, that religion also actually doesn't work, at least as it's traditionally presented. You can't tell someone who is seriously questioning the world to stop questioning and just believe in this with no proof, no evidence whatsoever. When you've gotten to this level of questioning, the only way to answer it is not getting answers from some other source, whether it's another individual, a teacher, or an institution. We need to find the solutions within our own experience, within our own lived experience. We need to confirm it there because that's where it's happening, that's where it's coming from this collision between myself and the world. And again, and I'm sure what I'm about to say is predictable, if we're at that point in our lives, then I do believe meditation has something to offer because it is grounded in our own experience. That through the process, it's only through meditation that we can develop the perceptual power to cut through this veil of darkness that seems to surround us and that seems to have engulfed the human heart. We need greater intensity of insight to get past. If the world just seems like a huge mountain of sin and crime, we need a perceptual tool that will cut through that to see if there's something beyond that. Because it's probably too early to make a conclusion and write off the entire human race. And what I can say, based on the experience of my teacher and on the meditative experiences of the community that I have lived in for the past over 20 years, that when you meditate, as we experience the cleansing and sort of illuminating power of meditation, we will begin to see something different in human beings, and our perspective on human beings, on life, on the entire human civilization will begin to change. We will begin to see a kind of inner light that radiates from all human beings, from all living beings, from the world itself. That has nothing to do with how good or bad we are. We will see it within our own minds, within the depths of our own self-reflection that occurs in meditation. We will see something intangible and uncanny and impossible actually to measure. We will only know that it's there, and meditation brings us deeper and deeper into it. And as we go into meditation, our own posture relaxes. We're no longer so quick to judge the entire world or judge ourselves before we've gotten to fully know ourselves or the nature of our own existence. We are ready to suspend judgment and investigate further. And what we find as we go into meditation is that this life that seems so serious and so tragic and so heavy and so obstructed actually is a kind of a game, a dream, a kind of a play. That these are common phrases that are used to describe human existence within the Sun Buddhist tradition. And the rule of the game, the goal of the game is to gain wisdom and compassion. And as we look at people, our perspective on them begins to change. We begin to see nobility in their struggle, dignity in our day-to-day lives. It's not meaningless. That there are human qualities that are revealed through the day-to-day mess of living, heroic qualities among very ordinary people. And we begin to respect other people. We begin to respect our own pain. And we don't think of ourselves as being so ridiculous or so silly or so shameful. And as this respect and compassion begins to grow, we begin to feel a natural desire to help others. And so meditation brings us into compassion very, very naturally, not by telling us what to believe, but by transforming our consciousness, by opening our eyes to a greater world than the world of suffering. That's the only thing that we've seen thus far. And as we do this, we enter into very naturally what's called in Buddhism the path of the Bodhisattva, the path of the one who seeks enlightened wisdom, not just for their own salvation, but so that they can help all other people. And so our entire way of looking at the world changes, and we begin to understand that to look at the world and to try to judge it and weigh it on some arbitrary scale of worth was a misguided project to begin with. The world and other people do not exist for us to give them grades, to evaluate and judge. The world exists to be seen through in the act of spiritual illumination and to be loved. And we need to see this. I am not presenting this as a doctrine, but as a natural experience that occurs in the process of meditation. And if we are deeply questioning the worth of life, the worth of human beings, then I would argue that meditation is absolutely necessary to move out of this trap of nihilistic despair that we may find ourselves in that's causing us all sorts of pain and problems with our self-esteem. So in closing, once again, I will encourage that we all enter into meditation and reserve judgment. No one is smart enough to know the whole world all at once. So we reserve judgment, take an attitude of humbleness, try to begin our lives again, and again, let's try and use these wisdom teachings for their greatest benefit and profit. And in closing, I would like to share with you a quote that was given to me by my own teacher, Sun Master Songdam. And this is a passage apparently from the Buddhist scriptures, and it goes like this. The sun makes the day bright. The moon makes the night beautiful. Discipline gives dignity to the warrior. So too, quiet meditation distinguishes the seeker of enlightenment.